Peace to the 12, man. Y'all see the title. This anthropologist said that the ancient Egyptians were black people in the 1800s. I'll say this one more time. This anthropologist said the ancient Egyptians were black people in the 1800s. And any of you guys know, or been watching me for a little minute, you already know I've been proved that a long time ago. But this is just another one to add to the notch on that belt of proof. All right, and also, brothers have been asking me this for a long time. I finally did it. I made a Twitter account, and the only thing I'm gonna be posting on this Twitter account is books and page numbers. All right, that's just like it says. I post historical books with page numbers, and the Twitter account is called Robert Penn. I'll probably link it in the comments. Right. All I do is I post the book, like the title, James Cowles Picard, which is who we're going to be using today. The page, the date it was released, and if the link is available, I'll put the link, and then I'll post what it is. Anyway, so yeah, let's get into it. This anthropologist. So I'm gonna kick it off with 2nd Ezra 6:28. As for faith, it shall flourish; corruption shall be overcome, and the truth, which hath been so long without fruit, shall be declared. And of course, that's megafold, like the truth, as in who we are, our identity is being declared, and as well as the information written in history books from the 1800s, 1700s, and beyond is coming out and exposing things. So anyway, the guy I'm going to be referencing here is a guy by the name of James Cowles Picard, right? A guy born in February 11th, 1786. He died December 23rd, 1848. He was a British physician and ethnologist with broad interest in physical anthropology and psychiatry. That's how you spell that? I never knew that. His influential research is into the physical history of mankind touched upon the subject of evolution. From 1845, Picard served as a medical commissioner in lunacy. So, yeah. And what is an ethnologist? An ethnologist is just another way of saying someone who is an anthropologist. Let's prove that real quick. An ethnologist is an anthropologist who studies ethnology, which is the comparative and analytical study of different cultures and societies. Rather than focusing on a single culture in depth like an ethnographer, an ethnologist analyzes data from various cultures to uncover similarities and differences, seeking to understand overarching patterns and structures of human cultural practices and social organizations. So anyway, this guy, James Cowles Picard, wrote a book that's titled Researches into the Physical History of Man, and that's where we're going to be going to go to his statement where he says that, yeah, of course, the ancient Egyptians were so-called black people, right? And the only reason I'm really doing this video, and the only reason I go into this a lot, is because once you prove who the ancient Egyptians are, you prove who the Israelites are, because all throughout the Bible, the Israelites were mistaken for Egyptians. So if the Egyptians in the ancient times were black, that would mean that, you guessed it, the ancient Israelites looked like the Egyptians. That would mean that. Anyway, so we're going to go to page 228. Right? Section 2, descriptions of the Egyptians left by ancient writers. Now check this out. We're going to read this. He says, I have observed that if we had no other data than the description left by the Greeks of the personal traits of the Egyptian, we should certainly conclude that they were Negroes. So let's stop right there. So he just made the statement that if all they had to go on was the Greeks' descriptions, meaning the Greek writings of ancient Greece, if that's all they had to go on, then by default, you would certainly conclude that the Egyptians were Negroes. I just wanted to point that out. Let's continue on. There is a well-known passage of Herodotus from which no reader would fail to draw his influence. The authority of this historian is of the more weight, as he had travailed in Egypt and was therefore well acquainted from his own observation with the appearance of the people. And it is well known that he is in general very accurate and faithful in relating the facts and describing the objects which fell under his personal observation. So in other words, he's saying Herodotus was credible. He was a man about his business, man. Right? Matter of fact, if you ever look up Herodotus, one of the titles that they give him is they call him the father of history. That's how much of a respected historian that he was. And that's why he said he was faithful in relating facts and describing objects that fell under his personal observation. Right? Now let's see what Herodotus has to say. I've already told you what he had to say before in previous videos, but he's about to let you know. In his account, whose account? Herodotus. In his account of the people of Colchis, he says that they were a colony of Egyptians, and supports his opinion by this argument that they were black in complexion and woolly haired. These are exactly the words used in the description of undoubted Negroes. Matter of fact, you got this one Edomite. I don't know his name, but he's like a Edomite with long black hair and a neck beard. He tries to say, oh, Herodotus actually just said that they were dark. No, when you go into the Greek, all right, and you translate what exactly it says, the word is black. All right, the word that's used is black. I've done this before in another video. So anytime you hear somebody say, oh, he meant swarthy, or no, he meant black, when you go to a straight Greek to English translation. Anyway, which is what this guy comes to this conclusion. Matter of fact, during this time, right, he was born in the 1700s, but he wrote this book in the 1800s, 1813 to be specific. At this time, he couldn't Google Translate the shit. So he didn't use Google Translate. So you know what he did? His ass opened up a dictionary, went into the Greek dictionary, went into the Greek lexicon, and found the word, and he noticed that the word was black. All right, that's how you prove that. But anyway, they're calling the Egyptians that they were black in complexion and woolly hair. These are exactly the words used in the description of the undoubted Negroes. Herodotus, in another place, alludes to the dark complexion of the Egyptians, as if it was very strongly marked, and indeed as if they were quite black. After relating the fable of the foundation of Dondonaean oracle by a black pigeon, which had fled from Thebes in Egypt and uttered prophecies, on which passage the scholarless observes that the Colchians were black, and that their dusky hue was attributed to their descent from the Egyptians, who were the same complexion. Right? So I can end the video right there, but he goes on to explain even more, right? Page 229. For those that know, that was on page 228, if I didn't say. Now we're going to go to page 229. He says, he supposes that the oracle to have been instituted by a female captive from Thebaid, enigmatically described as a bird, and subjoins that representing the bird as black, they mark that the woman was an Egyptian, right? So the black woman was an Egyptian. Some other writers have expressed themselves in similar terms. Aeschylus in the Supplices mentions the crew of Egyptians bark as seen from an eminence on the shore. The person who espies them concludes them to be Egyptians from their black complexion. There are other passages in ancient writers in which the Egyptians are mentioned as swarthy people, which, by the way, the word swarthy just means black. Just go to etymology and do that. Which might, with equal propriety, be applied to a perfect black or to a brown or dusky Nubian, right? See that? We have in one of the dialogues of Lucian description of a young Egyptian who represented to belong to the crew of a trading vessel at the Piraeus. Is said to him that besides being black, he had projecting lips and was very slender in the legs, and that his hair and the curls bushed up behind marked him to be a slave. This description of the hair, however, might rather apply to a frizzled and bushy curls like those worn, really shown at Barber or Bushari, than to the heads of Negroes. Mr. Lay says in describing the barbarian Cyrene that their hair is frizzled at the sides and stiffened out with grease, resembling the sort of coiffure on the head of the Sphinx. He adds that the make of their limbs resembles that of the Negroes. In Egyptian paintings, particularly in the representation of agricultural scenes described by Mr. Hamilton, the hair has a very similar appearance. From comparing that, the accounts, some of which were written by persons who had traveled in Egypt and whose testimony is not likely to have been biased in any respect. So we're saying it's not like their testimony was biased. It's not like these people were, what's the damn word they use? It's not like these people were Afrocentrists, right? It's not like they were biased in any respect. We must conclude that the subjects of the pharaohs had something in their physical character approximating to that of the Negro. Right? So that's what this guy had to say. And I'm not done. I'm gonna get some pharaoh pictures as well. Some busts and so on and so forth. I'm gonna get some scriptures too. James Cowles Picard. That's what he had to say. All right, and he was born in 1786. All right, and this book came out in 1813, like I said. So let's get a bonus book real quick before I go into the pharaoh pictures and all that, which I've already done this a million times. But anyway, so we're gonna go to Jean-Francois Champollion. He was a French historian who founded scientific Egyptology. Right, and he was also born in 1790 and he died in 1832. And this guy, Jean-Francois Champollion, is literally known as the father of Egyptology. He is called the father of Egyptology. Right? So we're going to go to his book called L'Atris Escrite d'Egypte et de Nubie by Jean-Francois Champollion. And we're going to go here, right? We're going to translate it because it was written in French, but we're going to translate it to English. So it says, Letters written of Egypt and Nubia in 1828 and 1829 by Champollion the Young. Right? Right here, this is all written in French. We're going to decipher it. So this little part written in blue, it says, Appendix Summary Notice on the History of Egypt written in Alexandria for the Viceroy and delivered to His Highness in November 1829. Now we're going to read what this part says right here. And he's going to say the same thing that the other guy said. Mind you, this is the father of Egyptology. He says, the first tribes, keyword, first tribes, who populated Egypt, that is to say the valley of the Nile between the cataract of Aswan and the sea, came from Abyssinia or Sennaar. What is Abyssinia? Abyssinia is Ethiopia, the Ethiopian Empire, right? Or Sennaar. Did I explain what Sennaar was? No, I didn't. But it is impossible to fix the time of this first migration, which is extremely ancient. The ancient Egyptians belonged to a race of men quite similar to the Kenis or Barbus, current inhabitants of Nubia. All right, these are your Nubians. We do not find among the Copts of Egypt any of the characteristic features of the ancient Egyptian population. The Copts are the result of the confused mixture of all nations which successfully dominated Egypt. It is wrong to want to find among them the main traits of the old race, right? So basically he's saying the first inhabitants came from Ethiopia, all right, meaning they were so-called black. Now that being said, I'm going to show you guys some pharaohs. A lot of you that have been watching me for a while, y'all already seen them, but I'm going to always do it because I get new people watching me all the time. So let's go to the first pharaoh, Pharaoh Narmer. He was from the first dynasty, right? He was a mythical king. Some people even say he was Nimrod. Anyway, King Menes, also known as Pharaoh Narmer. This is what he looked like. Flat nose, right? This is a picture of Mike Tyson. This is a picture of Pharaoh Narmer, also known as Pharaoh Menes, right? Look at this. Look at these pictures, man. But that's not it. Then we go to the second dynasty, Pharaoh Ninetjer, 2845 BC. This is Pharaoh Ninetjer. This is KRS-One. They literally have the exact same nose and ears. Now check out this bust right here, Pharaoh Ninetjer. You see this hairstyle? This hairstyle still exists among the Ethiopians. Ninetjer, the third king of Egypt's second dynasty. Look at his hair and look at this. This is a Hamar woman from Hamar tribe, Ethiopia. This hairstyle is the same. It's the exact same. Right? KRS-One, same nose, all that. Yeah. Right? It's what's known as so-called Negroid features. Flattish nose, flat root of the nose, and narrower ears. Right? Yeah. So-called Negroid features. Okay? Let's continue. Let's go to Pharaoh Khufu. And just for point of reference before I go to that, when you look at most Arabs, what do most Arabs have? They have an alkaline nose, much like the Caucasian Jewish man, and much like the Greek nose, right? Meaning it's somewhat hooked, right? In other words, not a flat nose, in mass, of course. Anyway, Pharaoh Khufu, the fourth dynasty. This is a picture of Pharaoh Khufu, same thing, flat nose. This is a picture of Pharaoh Khufu. And here's some flat-nosed, dark-skinned Africans. Here's Pharaoh Menkaure, 4th dynasty. As you can see, he's got this hat on, but underneath this little headdress, you see this hair. It once again goes back to that Hamar tribe hairstyle. Then you have Pharaoh Neferfre of the 5th dynasty, who literally has waves in his hair. The man literally has waves in his hair, man. Then you got Pharaoh Nyuserre of the 5th dynasty. Once again, he has that KRS-One nose. Then you have Pepi the First of the 6th dynasty of Egypt. And this is just a African man, right? And you see, they don't want you to know that the ancient Egyptians were black, because if you knew that the ancient Egyptians were black, then that would mean that the ancient Israelites also would have had to have been black, because all throughout the Holy Bible, the Israelites are mistaken for Egyptians. Let's prove that. Let's go to the mistaken identity, right? Let's look at Moses. All right, we know Moses was born of a Hebrew woman, right? And then the child grew. Let's go to Exodus 2:10. The child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she called his name Moses, and she said, because I drew him out of the water. So, as we all know, Moses was a Hebrew, a Levite to be specific, and he was raised among the Egyptians, and they just thought he was an Egyptian. The proof of that is in Exodus 2:15 on down, right? It says, now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their flocks. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came away with their father, he said, how is it that you are come as soon today? This is what they said to his father. And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock. So they called Moses an Egyptian. They just thought he was an Egyptian, meaning what? He looked like a damn Egyptian, right? Moses was a so-called black man. Then we go to Joseph, right? You read about it in Genesis 42, right? When Joseph gets sold into slavery, right? Let's go here. I'm just going to read it from the top. Genesis 42:3. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt, but Benjamin, Joseph's brother Jacob, sent not with his brethren. For he said, lest peradventure mischief befall him. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, whence come ye? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. So Joseph was able to recognize his 10 brothers, but they didn't recognize Joseph. They just thought that Joseph was an Egyptian. It even tells you that in Genesis 42:8. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they didn't recognize him. They didn't recognize him. They thought he was just another Egyptian because they looked the same, right? Another guy who was mistaken for an Egyptian, of course, is the Apostle Paul, right? Acts 21:37. And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, may I speak unto thee? Who said, canst thou speak Greek? Art not thou that Egyptian, which before these days made us an uproar and led us out unto the wilderness, 4,000 men that were murderers? For Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Sicilia, a citizen of no mean city, and lo, I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people. So right there, we know that Paul was a Jew, and specifically he was of the tribe of Benjamin, yet he was mistaken for an Egyptian, right? Because Paul looked like a damn Egyptian. It's real simple, right? So you see, and let me go here real quick too. You see, it was even written down in the Bible that these nations, aka other races, would try to erase our Israelite history from existence, and they all joined together in the conspiracy to omit us, right? Another word for a nation is what? A race of people. Well, let's look at all these nations. They all went against us in Psalms 83. It's already been written. So we'll go to Psalms 83, verse 1. Really, it's 4, but I'm going to start at 1. A song of Psalm of Asaph. Keep not thou silence, O God. Hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against thee. So all these nations are complicit in omitting our footprint, our ancestral footprint, right? They want you to believe that the Israelites were white and or Arabs, right? And it tells you who's clicked up. It gives you the name of the nations. Another word for nation is what? Race of people. It says the tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites of Moab, the Hagarenes, Gabal, Ammon, Amalek, Philistines, the inhabitants of Tyre. Ashur also is joined with them, and they have hope in the children of Lot. Selah. Right? They say, come. This is other versions of Psalms 83 and 4. They say, come, let us erase them as a nation. May the name of Israel be remembered no more. For with one hand they plot together. They form an alliance against you. Right? And I got one. And notice Moab was mentioned. I got one about the Moabites coming up, man. About the ancient history of things going on in the land of Moab. But anyway, man, that's pretty much the end of the video. Just, adding another, like I said, add another statement that somebody said as a notch to your belt to prove about the ancient Egyptians, which proves our ancient Israelite identity. So anyways, man, with that, I say peace to the 12. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to the Heavenly Father, the Most High Yahawah, in the name of His only begotten Son, yahawashi. Yahawah is the name of the Heavenly Father, who the world commonly calls God. Yahawashi is the Savior of the nation of Israel, who the world commonly calls Jesus Christ. I want to say shalom, which means peace. To you people that are out there listening, learning, you brothers doing this work, true to sincerity, and to you elders that's been doing this thing before me, man. I'm going to get up on out of here. Gone. Shalom.